Hello, this is Mark Selinsky from Kensington Security Consulting. This episode is titled The Southern Poverty Law Center. Islamophobia? Really? Today we turn to the Southern Poverty Law Center, or SPLC, which is much in the news these days. First, let's recap our first videocast of Pigs and Men, and women too. In that video, we briefly examined two stories about pigs in Europe. The first involved a yellow plastic pig in the front window of an Italian delicatessen. It was clearly a marketing prop, and there's no reason to believe the store owner intended to offend Muslims by displaying it. But a Muslim village elder demanded that the owner remove it, and when he refused, the case went to court. The owner and his pig won round one. There is a standoff as the deli's owner refuses to chuck the swine, and influential Muslims demand that he do so. Why did I mention it? This is one of the myriad points of tension in Europe over seemingly trivial issues. The pig dustup is by itself trivial, but it almost humorously illustrates the growing tensions in Europe, which, to my observation, are worsening rather than improving. The other pig story is the claim that women are buying pigs to keep annoying Muslim men at bay. I think this is largely a hoax, which is why I mentioned it. As the story goes, European women are tired of unwanted sexual advances from Muslim men, so they harness pigs to leashes and walk them on city streets. Right, a woman will bunk near a pig in her tiny European apartment and clean up after it so she can use it as a deterrent against Muslim men. Does that make sense to you? Well, it is circulating online, and I don't buy it. If you have inside baseball on the pigs of Paris or Rome, please let us know. But anyone who believes this is a truthful story will believe anything but prove me wrong. Okay, enough of pigs. Now let's turn to today's episode. The Southern Poverty Law Center, Islamophobia? Really? This week we will examine the ongoing controversy surrounding the Southern Poverty Law Center, or SPLC. Staying true to our goal at Jihad in the world, we will limit this podcast to Middle Eastern issues within the broader drama of the SPLC. In particular, we will focus on the SPLC's charges and biographies of leading Middle East commentators whom the center labeled as Islamophobic. We will look at the origins, mission statement, evolution, and the controversy it is currently embroiled in. What is the SPLC? The answer depends on whom you ask. By its own account, it defends racial justice issues. Okay? Good so far, but what do they mean by racial justice issues? Their website lists quite a menu: challenging racism, strengthening democracy and voting rights, dismantling white supremacy, ending unjust imprisonment, and eliminating poverty and economic inequality. That is an exhaustive mission statement. Tackling multiple wicked problems, certainly ambitious. I'm still confused, but I would like to limit this video cast to Middle Eastern and Islamic issues. But first, what is the current lawsuit about? The Department of Justice was indicted in April 2026 on charges of fraud and money laundering. Prosecutors said the group misled donors by using their money to pay the very hate groups the organization was founded to fight. Why would they do that? The SPLC responded that it paid informants just as the FBI or the military does. Justice says that this explanation is nonsense. The payments were part of a vast fraud that funded high-profile organizations to inflate their importance and lethality. These groups included the Ku Klux Klan, which is nationally notorious. But funding the Klan, is this serious? Yes, because the SPLC needed a cause, a great big one, to solicit mega donations. Well, it worked. The SPLC has an endowment of nearly $1 billion, some of which is held offshore. Okay, but what is the purpose and business model of the center? It states, quote, "The Southern Poverty Law Center works to dismantle white supremacy in public forums and online, exposes hate and anti-democratic extremism, and counters disinformation and conspiracy theories with research and community resources, unquote. The Intelligence Project monitors and exposes, in its words, white supremacy, anti-immigrant activity, and anti-Muslim activity, as well as their impact on communities, okay? That's still awfully broad. What counts as anti-Muslim activity? Certainly, harassing or harming Muslims because they are Muslims is an anti-Muslim activity, okay? But what about drawing cartoons of Muhammad? Some European Muslims flew into homicidal rage years ago when a Danish newspaper sponsored a Draw Muhammad contest. Enraged Muslims killed journalists who worked for the satirical Charlie Hebdo for sketching portraits of Muhammad. Then there is the charge against the yellow pig of Padua. Would the SPLC declare this to be anti-Muslim activity? We don't know because the SPLC does not clearly define anti-Muslim activity. Now let's turn to an article the SPLC published in 2011. They charge, a decade after 9/11, anti-Muslim hatred is on the rise again. This time, a cadre of activists and officials is largely responsible. Hmm, okay, what are those groups and who are these people? Over the years, the SPLC has identified 7 key Islamophobes. They are Robert Spencer, Brigitte Gabriel, Frank Gaffney, David Horowitz, David Yerushalmi, Daniel Pipes, and Steve Emerson. I would like to examine the charges against a few of them to see whether, in the SPLC's damning words, they are Islamophobes. Daniel Pipes. Let's start with Daniel Pipes, whom I know and respect. I have a very different take from the SPLC's. In its words, Pipes has spent the better part of 3 decades actively promoting anti-Muslim rhetoric. His anti-Muslim bigotry has not waned, unquote. Wow, strong words. And now for the evidence. He called Islam an imperialist faith and claimed that Muslim immigrants want to replace existing European civilization with Islam. In another interview, he lamented that Islam will soon replace Western civilization because of unfettered immigration and blind multiculturalism, unquote. Okay, it would have been helpful if the SPLC had provided the context in which he made these claims. In any case, the implicit charge is that these comments are bigoted and false. Is calling Islam an imperialist faith bigoted? What was the Ottoman Empire if not an empire? Why did the Ottomans call it an empire? Wasn't it Muslim? Didn't it govern by Islamic principles in the Pact of Omar? That empire is defunct, but have all imperialist elements been purged from Islam? Has this been reflected in the fatwas from Al-Azhar University? I haven't seen this. Have you? Where is the bigotry regarding Muslim immigrants who want to replace existing European civilization with Islam? I do not see any bigotry in this observation. Do all Muslims want to impose Sharia law on Europeans? No. But if many do, and I think many do, where is the bigotry? Back to that poor, tired pig of Padua. Muslim elders want the swine removed from the window because pigs offend Muslims. If this were the only case of Muslims demanding that Europeans cater to their sensibilities, it would be trivial. However, if this demand is one in an avalanche of claims, there is a case to be made that Muslim communities demand that, in the words of the SPLC, European civilization cater to Islamic mandates. In any case, Dr. Pipes' observation is hardly bigoted. The SPLC claimed that, quote, Pipes was among the first to peddle the unsubstantiated myth that 80% of American mosques are controlled by extremists. Despite being debunked on several occasions, the 80% figure is still promoted within anti-Muslim circles and publications, unquote. Okay, if that figure is debunked, what is the number? SPLC. Do you share Dr. Pipe's definition of extremist? What are your sources? SPLC. The SPLC also chides Dr. Pipes for popularizing the term no-go zones in Europe. He used the term in 2006 to describe Muslim-only zones in France and later regretted it. Fair enough. But that was 20 years ago. Demographics have changed. Have Muslim areas in Europe become safer for police and Europeans or less safe? Can a Jew dress as a Jew and feel safe in large cities? Off the record, many police officers in European cities have referred to parts of those cities as no-go zones. Some avoid the term for fear of being labeled an Islamophobe. What would the SPLC call these zones? Is it Islamophobic to even mention them? This is particularly important because the issue warrants discussion. What words are acceptable to the SPLC? Finally, I want to address one charge that Dr. Pipes responded to in 2016. The SPLC's Heidi Beirich, a contributor to its field guide to anti-Muslim extremists, wrote that, quote, "The call for a ban on any religious dress is indeed extreme, regardless of the religious institution." Daniel Pipes, another extremist on this list, has also called for a similar ban. These calls are contrary to religious freedom, unquote. In fact, Dr. Pipes argued that niqabs and burqas should be banned because they hide the face and obscure identification. Pipes wrote this. Had you bothered to consult my blog on this subject with over 100 incidents where these articles of clothing have been used to facilitate criminality, political violence, and jihad, you would understand the problem. That makes sense to me. What about you? Another SPLC target is Brigitte Gabriel, founder and head of ACT for America and the American Council for Truth. The SPLC cites Gabriel's words to condemn her. She said, "America has been infiltrated on all levels by radicals who wish to harm America. They have infiltrated us at the CIA, at the FBI, at the Pentagon, at the State Department. Let's focus on the Pentagon. Military personnel committed mass murder at Fort Hood, including Nidal Hassan and Mark Fidel Cools in the Middle East, who killed American soldiers. I would be curious to know her sources for the claims of infiltration, but I do not see them as bigotry. I would like to learn more." Then there is Robert Spencer, who runs the Jihad Watch website. The SPLC derides him as entirely self-taught in the Quran. He holds an advanced degree in religion. And the fact that he doesn't hold a PhD from Columbia or Georgetown in Middle East studies is, in my view, not a slur. They condemn him for his associations. In their words, Spencer has been known to fraternize with European racists and neo-fascists, though he says such contacts were merely incidental. That is what they wrote. But who were these racists and neo-fascists? This also smacks of the Communist Association charges of the 1940s and 1950s. Did Sterling Hayden have lunch with one of the Hollywood 10? He may have, but does that make him a communist? If Robert Spencer had a group lunch in which a neo-fascist was at the table, does that make him a neo-fascist? Once again, what is a neo-fascist? I could continue with additional charges and SPLC targets, but I think I've made my case. In my view, many of these charges were reckless and unsubstantiated, and they can sting. Reputational harm has led to blacklisting, as it did in the 1940s and 1950s. There could be a whole podcast or several about victims of the SPLC. Some have lost employment opportunities, and some have been demonetized online. I am excited that the SPLC's activities will be fully investigated. On behalf of Kensington Security Consulting, thank you for listening. Nothing in this episode or in any other videocast or podcast constitutes the official position of the United States government. My latest book, Cauldron of Terror, Hamas, Israel, and the World, will be available for purchase in summer 2026. Until our next podcast, goodbye, and thank you for listening.